If you lose a plant, a native species from somewhere, then you never know what kind of associations it has. All plants are interrelated to each other, and animals. And if you take one animal out, or one plant out in this case, you never know what's going to happen. For this project, we picked Fiji and Tonga. Tonga is the it's the easternmost part of Western Polynesia, and there's a lot of native forest, particularly in the area where we spend a lot of time. And Fiji is much more diverse, and it's a good example of Melanesia. There's perhaps 1,600 or 1,800 native species of flowering plants in Fiji. So this little video is about one that's very diverse, Fiji, one that's not so diverse, but it has a lot more cultural aspects in it in Tonga. In Tonga, only about 4% of the Tongan plants, the native Tongan plants, are found only there. Fiji, 60% of the native flowering plants are endemic, found nowhere else. You can divide all the plants in the Pacific into native species and alien species. Native means that they're naturally found in an area. They arrive by natural means. Alien species means species that usually more recent arrival, and they were brought by either the Polynesians, that's a Polynesian introduction, or in modern times you call it a modern introduction. Well, for this movie, the plants we particularly wanted to talk about were the native species, that's the endemic and the indigenous species, because a lot of these are threatened with extinction in the islands. Endemic means found only in one place in the world, so a plant that's endemic to Fiji is found nowhere else. So if you're worried about plants disappearing from an island, the most important ones are the endemics, because if an indigenous species disappears from Fiji, you can probably still find it in Vanuatu or Tonga. But if an endemic species disappears from Tonga, for instance, the island of Apia has about 4, 5, 6 different species that are found only at one island. So if they develop the whole island and cut all the forest down, those plants could disappear. If an endemic species disappears from a country, it disappears forever, because that's the only country it's found in. Right now, we're in a plantation forest. I think it's West Indian cedar or mahogany, I forgot the name, but no native trees in here, just these timber trees, very nice timber trees. 3,000 years ago, this was covered with native rainforest, but it's all gone now. But when we get up to the top, get out of this plantation, we'll find much better forest. Different genera in the same families. Wow, this is the biggest banyan tree I've ever seen in Polynesia, I think. At least the native one. This is Ficus prolixa. There's 2 species here, but for some reason this is the more common one. It has the spreading roots. You know, it spreads much wider than the other one. The other one just sends the arrow roots down straight. The other one is Ficus obliqua. This is Ficus prolixa. But a major source of food for pigeons because of all the little green fig fruits. It's a fig, actually. There's a very, very interesting epiphyte here. Epiphyte is a plant that grows on another plant. You know, the Latin is epi, which means upon, and phyte means a plant. And epiphytes grow on other plants, but they don't use them for food or anything. They just use them for a place to live. So they don't harm the tree at all unless they become too heavy and weigh too much. They like to get up closer to the sunlight and the canopy, but since they're herbaceous, if they're on the ground, they can't go anywhere. So they've developed a habit of being able to grow on branches of trees. There's 25 or 30 species of fern. This is a bird nest fern. Here's, there's a better fruit, yeah. This is the Disoxylum Tonga ants. They use it for timber, I guess. But you can see the fruit here. It's also a very important tree for pigeons. Here's a fruit that's been broken open, so the pigeons will eat these seeds. This is the only island in the world where this tree is found. Nowhere else in the world. It's related to something in Samoa, actually, but the Samoan one is a high elevation tree. It's only found generally above 600 meters. It's a dominant tree at the very highest elevations of Samoa. But here, the relative of it is a limestone forest tree in Tonga, 1,000 miles away. So, interesting distribution. Right here on the forest floor, we have a very interesting fungus. It's called earth star. Geaster is the genus. It's a fungus. And you can see that, well, actually, the tips of the star haven't spread apart yet. But you can see little flies landing on it. and the flies are attracted to it for some kind of sticky substance, I guess, and they're eating it. But they get it on their feet and they move around and they spread the spores of the fungus to other places. Here we have an example of utilization of rainforest tree. This is Alphatonia zizophoides. It's in the buckthorn family, Rhamnaceae. The local name is Toi, T-O-I. And the bark here has been harvested. At first I thought the tree was ring bark to kill it, but they left this one little strip of bark so the tree will live in a damaged condition. But all this bark was taken away, probably to be pounded into a medicine called vaikahi. Vaikahi is some kind of internal ailment, and it's like a purge. They get barks from 4 or 5 different trees. And the healers, the Phaita'o, use it, but also you can buy it in bottles in the marketplace in Nuku'alofa. So this is a good example of the utilization of rainforest. If you took all the rainforest down, then they wouldn't have this kind of a tree to make their local medicines with.
Alma. Right. Yeah. Hinu vave, hinu beta alu poto man, alu ki os, pua, ayla, hold agi kalan, eh? I use it because for her teeth, something causes for her teeth, and there are something under her neck. In this one, it's becoming hard and the neck, and this is why I use it to make it soft and make her teeth to not be pain. Yeah.
Another use for this tree is timber. It's a very, very hard timber. It's used, one of the premier plants for making the tutuha. I think it's an anvil upon which they pound the tapa cloth. And here's a good example of a rainforest tree phenomenon. Some trees do this. It's called cauliflory. You produce fruits and flower trunk instead of off of branches. This particular one is a fig tree, Ficus scabra, I think. And you can see the little fig fruit here. It's coming right off this little knob here. Not too many trees do this, but it is sort of characteristic of many rainforest trees. Favorite food for pigeons and doves. This is what I really like about this job. We just came out of the clearing, the edge of the cliff here, and that tree over there appears to be a new record for Tonga, and we can't collect it because there's a big gap here. That'd be my last collection if I had to collect that. So we have to look along these ridges here and see if we can find a specimen of it, because we can't prove what it is until we get a specimen. All we can do is take photographs from a distance here, but this is just fascinating. Here we have a native Tongan orchid. This is Gojira rubicunda. The biggest family of plants in Tonga are orchids. There's about 42 different species. And some of them are terrestrial, that is, grow on the ground, most of them in fact, and some grow on trees. They're called epiphytes. Most people hardly recognize it as an orchid because the flowers are so small. This one is almost flesh-colored, so it's not bright and large like most orchids are. But the orchids that we know in culture are a lot of hybrids and so forth, but these are the native orchids.
This is Piper methysticum, a Polynesian introduced plant. It's commonly used as a beverage, or this plant would be a relative of the black pepper. So when you first initially drink the beverage, you can taste a peppery taste. Underneath here is a large root system, and this plant is about 2 to 3 years old, and maybe in another 3 years to 4 years it would be harvested, and then they would be dried and then ground into a very fine powder and then prepared traditionally in a kava circle or for special events at the villages around Tonga. The beverage is consumed very frequently, sometimes after church, sometimes in the evenings in the villages. It's an opportunity for men in the village to get together and discuss the daily business.
Here's another plant that's growing on the cliffs here, which is used for fragrant leis. It's Elixia stellata. This is a little plant. It's sort of a half shrub, half vine. You usually find it in coastal areas like on cliffs or in light coastal forest. Here's an interesting plant. This one here you can see it's an orange, a leafless vine climbing all over these other plants. It forms little structures called haustoria. It hooks to the stems of the other plants and gets to the xylem and phloem, and takes out nutrition from the plant. So it's a parasite. Cassytha filiformis is the name. Very common littoral plant all through the Pacific. This is a native species. It's called Hedecaria. Even though it has these interesting fruits and it's very common, it has no Tongan name. And my theory is if there's no use, no names. It's a nice Tongan kids game, but I have to teach it to them, I think. Oops, there, this popped right out of the fruit. So the pigeons eat the fruit and they digest the outer part. But the seed usually passes through their digestive tract unharmed, or they spit the seed out. This plant we found in a plantation is typically grown in plantations, sometimes in villages. It's called uhi in Tongan, usi in Samoan. It's Polynesian rue, Eurodia hortensis. It's in the citrus family and has a very strong smell. So this is a plant you can locate before you even see it.
This is what called uhi. Here in my home or beside my house to help to chase the ghost, to stop the ghost or get into my house.
This tree is called the Indian mulberry. It's Morinda citrifolia. Some people know it today as the Tahitian noni. It's not clear whether it's native to Western Polynesia or Eastern Polynesia, but somewhere along there it's been carried further to the east because this is one of the most valuable of all Polynesian plants. It's the #1 medicinal plant in Polynesia. The leaves are typically used for putting on to boils to bring them to a head, also for inflammations. And through much of Polynesia, I'm not sure about Fiji, but it was used as a ghost medicine. I guess traditional Polynesian beliefs are that ghosts hate these bad smells, and this particular fruit I have in my hand here, it smells dreadful. This tree is a very common littoral tree. That is a tree found on beaches throughout Polynesia. It's called Barontonia asiatica, or better known as the fish poison tree. The plant is pollinated at night, probably by moths. So in the morning, when the moths are no longer flying, or this part of the flower drops off. And but more interesting is this fruit. And inside it has a kernel that is used as a fish poison. If you eat the fish, it's no problem because it's a fish respiratory poison, but it doesn't affect mammals. The tree throughout Polynesia is called futu or hutu or utu, almost the same name every place you go. I think it's probably found from the Marquesas all the way into Southeast Asia or maybe even further. It must be Asia for sure because the scientific name is Asiatica, Barringtonia asiatica. I was here in 2002, 8 years ago, and walked down this road over here and found a new tree species nobody had ever collected in Tonga. It's a Fijian Pacific species, but it had never been found in Tonga before. So here we are again 8 years later. So I'll go down here now and look and see if we can find this rare tree. It looks kind of like the fowl tree. Well, we found the tree. So it's apparently very limited distribution in Tonga, but it's a widespread species. It's in Fiji, I think all the way to Guam at least. And you can see the very pretty little flowers here. They come off the stem. Instead of coming off of branches, they come off of little knobs or just almost directly off the bark. Yeah, the name of this tree is Mamea odorata. It's in the mangosteen family. That's east. The name of this plant is tutu, paper mulberry, Brucinedia papyrifera. So this is the raw material for making tapa cloth. The stems are harvested, and the woman then bites the end and strips off the bark, and then scrapes off the outside, and then spreads it on an anvil and uses a ike to pound it flat. What I have right here demonstrates a very important life form in the rainforest. It's called the liana. This is a woody vine that originally starts out creeping along the ground, and then it grows onto trees and goes way up into the canopy. So it's just like a tree, but it has no strength in the stem. This particular one is called St. Thomas bean, I think, Antana phaseoloides. So this is the individual seed, and this is the part of the pod. The pods are sometimes a meter long. You can see the seed in here. This one's kind of rotten, totally rotten, in fact. So this is an important life form in forests. You've got a number of different species. You probably have 10 different species of lianas in this forest. And this one here with the bumpy things, this are called lenticels, and they're little breathing holes. So they're corky, and the air can go into the stem because the stem needs oxygen to respire. 3 lianas, they'll wrap around each other, whatever it takes for them to get up to the canopy. These lianas going up to the top, you'll get other ones wrapping around, trying to go up to the top as well where they get more sunlight. One of the uses of this vine, if you have a bush knife and you're really thirsty, what you do is you cut a section through here, and then you hold this one and you cut it above it, and then you can hold it above your mouth and water will drip out. Of course, it kills the vine, but it helps you survive if you're really thirsty in the forest. It's called a water vine sometimes. Pa'anga or sipi is the Tongan names for this plant. And when you have a hurricane or a cyclone, it prevents some of the trees from being blown down because they're all tied together by these cables. So maybe it serves a function in forest cohesion and protection of forests from cyclones.
This is called liana, or wallai in Fijian. This is one of the plants that they use for fish drives, where they cut out these plants and they form a loop in the ocean, and the women will they have to tie up the leaves, coconut leaves with other leaves along the loop that's made out of the liana, and then they have to pull together to minimize the loop to form a small circle, driving the fish inward. It's called a avirau. They used in building Fijian houses on bure. These are used to tie up the rooftops with the thatches.
We have here a tea plant, Cordyline fruticosa. It's a member of the aloe family. This is one of the most important plants in Polynesia for several reasons. It was a very important medicinal plant. One of the things they do is they break off a leaf and they use it for massaging the head. So they put it on here. It's supposed to be a cooling effect. The root of it could be used for food, sort of more or less a famine food. This was the premier clothing plant in Polynesia.
Gona non rali kuni meke anga siliu. Hey. Torongo. Echi kuna kene daka. Pesu ko vina kasara. Gome banang unisal kat-katenin raki. Garandau bangataka, garandau lako TV kau. Kongo merangga baka menra.
It's an interesting plant because it's not clear whether it's native to Western Polynesia or not. But the problem in Western Polynesia and Fiji is that it looks like it's part of the native forests because it has red fruits that are eaten by birds and flowers and so forth.
There are but 2 species of via in Fiji. This is called via kau. And it's a totem for the whole province of Rewa, where this place belongs to. It is prepared in a very special way because if it's not done in its proper way, it won't be edible. The leaves too are very useful. They are used for making a lovo or earth oven. And in some places they eat the leaves as well, especially the young leaves, the very soft ones.
Do you know the name of this tree?
No.
This is called fowl. Can you eat the fruit?
No.
One of the uses, it's almost totally forgotten now, is the fruit. You can eat the seed in here. If you split this open, there's a wafer about that big, very thin, and it's edible, which is unusual because this is in the dogbane family, which is poisonous. But the fruit is not poisonous in this plant. The name of this plant is Nisosperma oppositefolium. Just a traditional knowledge like this of famine foods is being lost in Polynesia. Well, the major threats to plants, native species in Polynesia, one is loss of habitat. Later we're going to look at some mangroves here, and the mangroves have been cleared out around much of the islands. And so if there are species that are rare in the mangroves, and the mangroves are cleared, then these species disappear. Another loss of biodiversity factors is introduction of weedy species. If you look at any scene on the coastal areas of Tonga or Fiji, even Samoa, you see most of the plants there are introduced species, a lot of weedy species. The cultivars, of course, the crop plants and so forth, but most of the plants that are not crop plants are weeds, in fact, and they're not native species. So they compete with the native species and drive them out and cause them extinction. A third thing is sometimes the introduction of animals that do a lot of harm. It's not, in Samoa and Tonga and Fiji, it's not so much of a problem. Goats would be a problem. Goats left on small islands denude the island and cause extinction of most of the species on it. This is a mangrove association found on the edge of Bunda Bay, and it was discussed this morning with somebody. People want to cut down these mangroves, not only for the firewood, but the beach owners want to make a resort here or something, so they may target these plants. Most of the mangroves, or the well-known mangroves, belong to a family called the mangrove family, but there are mangroves in other families as well, but the best-known ones are in the Rhizophoracea. Mangroves have 3 unique adaptations to surviving this habitat. One is the possession of roots that are for aeration. They're called pneumatophores. This genus, Rhizophora, has these prop roots. They're hollow, spongy tissue inside here that allow for transfer of gases, so it allows the plant to get oxygen for the roots. The second one is called vivipary, so the root actually, the seed germinates on the plant and sends this root down, and sometimes it can be up to 1 meter in length, or at least a ½ meter in length. And when it falls off the plant, if that gets stuck in the mud, then it can grow into a new tree. So this is called vivipary, growing of the plant, one plant on another plant. In other words, the seedling is growing on the adult plant. The third adaptation, these are a very important type of vegetation. It's dominated by species that are salt tolerant. So these trees can grow actually in brackish, almost saltish water. They're usually in coastal areas where you have an estuary, so you have a bit of fresh water as well. Mangrove forest is a very important type of vegetation because it provides protection for the shore. It's been demonstrated that tsunamis have less of a damaging effect on shores that have mangroves on them. But the trouble is people cut down mangroves for firewood and for timber, but they also nowadays cut mangroves down because they want a nice clear beach. But when you have a clear beach, that opens up problems with erosion and possible damage from cyclone. People often ask me, so what's so important about extinction of species? What happens if we lose a species? What's the big deal? If we lose a species, we never know if that species is going to have some use in the future. If you lose a plant, a native species from somewhere, then you never know what kind of associations it has. All plants are interrelated to each other, and animals. And if you take one animal out, or one plant out in this case, you never know what's going to happen.